There's a fundamental idea about art that I think we often misunderstand. A sculpture, as we see it, is a finite object. In every work of art, there comes a moment when the final piece is carved away. The last brushstroke. It's the period that caps off a novel. We know definitively where a piece ends, and I think intuitively we assume that the beginning can be so neatly defined. But no novel begins with a blank page, and great paintings start long before we pick up the brush, because the goal is never the final object. Every line, every brushstroke, every word that I write is proof that I was here. I think we as people just want to be understood. Art is fundamentally a form of expression. Artists do not produce, they translate. Through the artistic process, lived experiences take on physical form. The difference between production and translation is the difference between a worker on the factory floor and a carpenter. Though they may produce an identical chair, art comes about through the carpenter's agency. If you'll allow me, I'd like to ask you to close your eyes and picture what that chair might look like. If I had to guess, the chair you're thinking of is probably made from wood with 4 legs and a back attached to the seat by a series of posts. Or maybe it isn't. No matter what you choose, your decision represents the totality of your lived experiences up until this point. The chairs that I picture most clearly sit around the dining room table of my childhood home. They began their life in the Chili's my mom worked at in college. Their deep green paint, now worn from decades of diners and family dinners. Though I'm miles away, I can feel the sensation of their worn seat cushions on my legs with photographic clarity. Even if we were to replace them, these chairs are a part of me. Their value is not derived from the aesthetics of their design or the comfort they provide, but rather from what they represent. Their physical form and the concept I hold in my mind becomes 2 sides of the same coin. The concept of the chair present in the carpenter's mind as they work will be shaped by their experiences. This represents the relationship between the artist and their work, but in another sense, it indicates the relationship between the viewer and the art object. The object may exist irrespective of your engagement with it, but meaning cannot. Art, as a translation of the human condition, requires a viewer. As results of the human condition, art and morality exist on the same plane. Consider the following passage from David Hume's A Treatise of Human Nature. Take any action allowed to be vicious, willful murder for instance. Examine it in all lights and see if you can find that matter of fact, or real existence which you call vice. In whichever way you take it, you find only certain passions, motives, volitions, and thoughts. There is no other matter of fact in the case. The vice entirely escapes you as long as you consider the object. You can never find it. Till you turn your reflection into your own breast and find a sentiment of disapprobation which arises in you towards this action. What Hume communicates here is that morality, as we understand it, does not exist in any quantifiable manner. Sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing, our senses are quantifiable. Photons hit your retina. Disturbance in the atmosphere are registered by your eardrums. An object impacts your skin, and we call it touch. These are measurable phenomena, calculable to the nth degree. But where in that number are you? We understand that light exists within the 380 to 750 nanometer range. But what does red mean if you've never seen color? The human condition begins where measurement ends. That feeling of redness can only be found within you. But what is art? Merriam-Webster defines art as the conscious use of skill and creative imagination, especially in the production of aesthetic objects. But I'm not sure Michelangelo spent 4 years glued to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel to produce an aesthetic object. Art is everything, or rather, it has the potential to be anything. Art is care and passion directed at something. When you create, that something is up to you. A red canvas, a bowl of soup, a cathedral, a sculpture, a novel. When I look at these things, they look back at me. I see myself, or perhaps a shared humanity with their creators. There is a closeness, an intimacy that comes with creating and interacting with art. Art is the totality of the human condition. It's the physical representation of thought, distilled through a chosen medium. Someone you love, your mother, perhaps, cooks you a dish and wordlessly you understand them a little bit better. You learn to cook, and you make that same dish for someone you love, and they in turn understand you. Art is empathy. It's watching a film and seeing your friend in one of the characters. The directors don't know it, the actors don't know it, your friend doesn't know it, but you feel you can understand them more than you did before. Art is the indescribable. It's David and Goliath. Given each person's body composition, a formula could be devised that will tell you Goliath will win. But the numbers have lied to you. Art is proof that we are more than a number. We are human. There is a definition for everything, but the central irony of art is that it is everything, and yet we will be no closer to defining it in our lifetimes than our predecessors. Art is the whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Reduce a person to their raw material, and you will not find their soul. The same can be said for art. Paint, canvas, ink, and paper are deceptive. Individually, they are meaningless, and yet I have to fight back tears in front of a Barnett Newman painting. I look at it, and I wonder if I've ever seen red before. Had everything prior been a mirage? What I hope to communicate here is that art is not ancillary to the human condition. It is the very fiber of our being. We often treat art as this extra, as if it were a child's toy. Behave and maybe we'll let you have it. This, ultimately, is suicidal behavior, and we can understand that when we look at life in art's absence. What are we left with? We're left with the highway you spend 2 hours on per day that probably plowed through a black neighborhood decades ago. Life without art is Q3 earnings and spreadsheets. It's the AI chatbot that people too illiterate to read an academic journal claim will take your job. It's shrinkflation, fracking, DoorDash, and subscription services. There's more to life than this. Without art, we're horses in the glue factory. Living, breathing beings that nonetheless can only find value in our ability to produce for others at the expense of ourselves. In a time where every advancement in technology seems to be made solely to rob you of your time and attention, art and our ability to engage with it presents a better path. The existence of and our access to art is not to be presupposed. To create art is to examine the world around you. The history of art frequently coincides with the history of those willing to speak truth to power. And for this reason, creatives and academics are often the first to be affected by fascist, and more broadly, authoritarian regimes. To understand why, we must first understand the characteristics of these movements. Authoritarian regimes hold and maintain power through concentration and suppression of opposition. They lie on a foundation which contradicts itself. Such regimes aim to create systems that could not recreate themselves through their own legal framework. This is the foundational hypocrisy of all authoritarian regimes and represents a danger that can never be overcome so long as they exist. Fascism, as a form of authoritarianism, aims to justify itself through a hierarchy of nation and race. They seek to create an in-group, dividing the people and by extension any hope of opposition. In the case of Nazi Germany, the in-group was the supposed Aryan race, while the out-groups included but were not limited to the Jewish people, those within the LGBTQ community, and academics. This pattern has also existed throughout the history of the United States in many machinations during Manifest Destiny, the Jim Crow South, and cultural conservative movements during the 1980s that continue to this day. While it may seem like the chosen in-group benefits at the expense of the various out-groups, the truth is that this manufactured status quo only serves to oppress both parties. What should be apparent is that these movements work only through the subjugation of others. They do not define themselves by any internally consistent doctrine or moral code. They stand only in opposition to the scapegoat of the day, and are therefore subject to change as it becomes convenient. A system that exists through violent oppression will not become peaceful the day it achieves its initial goals. Inevitably, they will move on to another group, and slowly the population will eat itself whole. Fascism thrives in an environment of non-thought. A public that fears for their life cannot be critical. By defining the other side as barbarous and inhuman, it becomes trivial to enact great acts of violence. This is why fascism relies on slogans. Immediate understanding removes the need for critical thought. The immediacy with which things needed to be understood has never been more apparent than in the art valued and hated by the Third Reich. Bronze statues lined the Great German Art Exhibition, which served to illustrate the Aryan race as the pinnacle of evolution and culture. The style that Nazi architecture took on was neoclassical, with significantly larger proportions. It represented a return to a tradition that had never existed. Under the Third Reich, art could do one of two things. Work that fit their strict requirements served to legitimize their false mythology, while anything that deviated was depicted as an attack on the German people. This approach is perhaps most emblematic of the dangers of fascism. If art is meant to elicit a predetermined reaction, the art object becomes irrelevant. When the art object's form is predetermined, so too is the role of the viewer. Both the viewer and the work become obsolete, valuable only in their ability to feed into the system. Art considered to be diametrically opposed to their standard could be found in the Antarctic Kunst exhibition, which is English for degenerate art. Hundreds of works stolen from museums around Germany by the Nazi Party were put on display. Walls were lined with prints and paintings from the likes of Piet Mondrian, Wassily Kandinsky, and 110 other artists deemed unacceptable by the Reich. Rhetoric around the exhibit focused on the cost of the paintings and their supposed weakness of character for reasons of racial disease. This established art as bourgeois and an affront to the sensibilities of the German people. Ultimately, the Nazis aimed to censor modern art movements, such as Dada and Surrealism, for their inherent subversiveness and frequent critiques of fascism. Of all the artists shown in the Antarctic Kunst, none were more frequently featured than Emil Nolde. Nolde was hugely influential in Germany as an early expressionist and member of the De Burke art group. Best known for his paintings of flowers, he wielded vibrant colors in a way that very few had done before. Under Nazi rule, his career would come to a halt, as over 1,000 of his paintings were taken from museums. Nolde was not permitted to paint, even non-commercially. Despite all of this, Nolde remained a member of one other group, the Nazi Party. Given his background, it seems difficult to believe, but Nolde was a racist and an anti-Semite. His hatred, it seems, outweighed his ability to reason. In examining Nolde's relationship with the party, we can understand a truth about the nature of fascism. It operates much like a pickpocket. A bump from one person conceals the fact that another just stole your wallet. In a similar sense, a false enemy distracts from a corrupt government. Nolde could not understand that hierarchical systems like fascism have no in-group, only a bottom that is perpetually consumed and replaced until there is nothing left. Nolde's approach represents the impotence of passivity, but what is left in the face of fascism? Defiance. German artist John Heartfield may have understood this best. Anti-fascist, Dadaist, and inventor of the photomontage, Heartfield used collage to co-opt Nazi propaganda. Works like Hooray, There's No Butter Left, with the caption, "Iron has always made a country strong. Butter and lard only make people fat," act as satire, depicting a family eating metal objects. It was a reminder that the ongoing food shortages were the result of war, rather than whatever strawman the Nazis would ultimately choose. Works like this illustrate the hypocrisy of fascist systems with humor. Using art as a weapon, he aimed to rob the Nazis of their legitimacy. Hundreds of his collages were published in the AIZ, a widely circulated magazine, which would earn Heartfield the 5th spot on the Gestapo's most wanted list. Heartfield may have said it best: "You must oppose this madness, escape, or do both." What we must understand is that fascism is an instinct. What happened in Europe was not an accident, nor was it an exception to history. It was the result of a fearful and uncritical public. Half a century later, this same sentiment would be echoed in the US by politicians like Jesse Helms in the fight to defund the National Endowment for the Arts. Under the guise of cutting government waste and protecting American families from pornography, Helms rallied against artists like Robert Mapplethorpe and Andreas Serrano. Helms and other conservative politicians' decision to hide behind the family as a justification for censorship reveals a condescension towards the American public that is at the foundation of their belief system. Though their stated beliefs may be lampshading for a general greed and hatred of others, if we are to take them seriously, their belief system will always assume that the public is too ignorant to decide what is best for themselves. It doesn't matter if your taste in art already aligns with Helms, the decision will be made for you. To this day, conservative rhetoric hides behind the family as a means of eroding civil rights. More recently, conservative figures have attempted to rein in art that does not fit their narrow definition of acceptable through the Make Architecture Beautiful Again executive order, which mandates traditional and classical styles for federal buildings. Here in Florida, we have seen book bans that are said to keep pornographic content out of the classroom, but really refer to books with gay and queer themes. Student loan forgiveness has been cut. They need you to be stupid. Today, we live in an era of soft fascism. We have traded the Gestapo for market forces. You may not be censored outright, but as the cost of living rises and every aspect of our lives are commoditized, we are fooled into thinking that art and expression are a luxury rather than a necessity. The unsustainable pace at which we are forced to move has created a culture that requires results, with no regard for process. To combat this, we were given large language models and sold on the idea that through technology we can skip to the result. The consequence has been a public that has completely lost the ability to think for itself, and in doing so, we have lowered ourselves from creators to editors of the mediocre. Unable to trust our own judgment, we use it to design and rephrase our own writing, flattening the range of human expression into a single dimension. In so completely prostrating ourselves to a technology that frequently hallucinates, we become too stupid to see when it lies and too impatient to care about its accuracy. But what does it mean to be stupid? In a letter written shortly before his execution at the hands of the Nazis, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor involved in an assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler, describes stupidity as not an intellectual defect, but a human one, stating that under the impact of rising power, humans are deprived of their inner independence and more or less consciously give up on establishing an autonomous position toward the emerging circumstances. The idea here is that in an environment of chaos, we can rely only on the basest of survival instincts. When being chased by a wolf, a rabbit will not think about food or its basic needs, and neither will you. In such an environment, time ceases to be linear. All that can exist is you in the current moment. Past atrocities and the future you will be deprived of remain just out of view. During a brisk October afternoon last year, I found myself searching for lunch in New York's Lower East Side. I decide on Shujiao Fuzhou, a Chinese restaurant recommended to me by the owner of another Chinese restaurant I had made conversation with the day prior. While waiting, I could see that soups were $3.50. 6 dumplings would cost the same amount. Standing in line, I watched the cooks work at breakneck speeds prepping food. Food service is difficult, but they were operating at a different level. It was almost stressful to watch. As we crept forward, I had the thought that they could probably double prices without losing many customers. It's New York. At $7, I wouldn't have batted an eye. When you consider that the average profit margin for fast casual restaurants in the city lies somewhere around 2 to 6%, the prices start to feel like black magic. Even if they lost customers, they could multiply their earnings while doing less work. As I pondered the economics of running a restaurant in Manhattan, a homeless person approaches, asking for change. I tell him I don't have any, which was true. I don't typically carry cash. I make it to the front of the line, cash only. ATM, back of the line. Now several spots behind the homeless person who managed to get enough cash to pay for food. Their pricing decisions, which once seemed to defy reasoning and market economics, clicked. In an era where the amount of filling in an Oreo correlates with the performance of the S&P, we often fail to see the human cost of the promise of infinite growth. Whether they know it or not, I think of the chefs and bussers like artists. To create art is to speak to something human in all of us. Whether it's a bowl of soup, a collage, a red canvas, or a building. Whether the market or the powers that be permit it, we must create. I'll tell you my ultimate goal in life. The thing that I may never hit, but if I do, I'll know that all of this was worth it. It's not money, it's not the Pritzker, but I'll get there, so help me God. I want to move someone to tears with my work. If I could make one person shed one tear, it would all be worth it. It almost feels like a myth. People seeing a Rothko painting for the first time, and somehow, as your mind floats through the deep purple and red hues, there's this swell of emotion. It starts in your chest, and it rises like a balloon. You're reaching for the string, but it slips from your grasp, and the feeling moves to the nape of your neck. And before you know it, you're crying, in a room in the East Wing of DC's National Gallery of Art. And it feels absurd that colors on a canvas could utterly disarm you, so you're half laughing, half crying, not sure what to do with each new emotion as they present themselves. You're embarrassed, but also grateful that you could feel so deeply about something. And you realize that these feelings aren't absurd. It's a miracle that the full range of the human experience could be felt so completely. I can't help but think that this is what life is about. Confronting a painting like that as an artist is a daunting task. Mark Rothko, Barnett Newman, and Michael Heiser feel like Greek gods. Their work unreplicable by the hands of mere mortals like you and I. But they too are people, and I can't help but feel pride that we're capable of creating something so impactful. Even if it isn't my work, it gives me something to strive for. Maybe I too can make someone feel this way. Moments like that stick with you. In thinking about the painting, I wondered whether I had felt like that before. I think back to an afternoon in Puerto Rico some years ago. You and 2 friends are in the kitchen. They're cooking, and you're observing. You don't know how to cook. Maybe you're there for emotional support. And then it hits you. You don't know when it happened, but the cloud that's been looming over you for the past 6 years is gone, and it hasn't been there for some time. You feel indebted in a way that's impossible to pay back, altered in a way that feels monumental, and they don't even know it. You can only hope that someone else can feel that way about you one day.